Reading excerpts from Game of Gods by Carl Teichrib, spelled Teichrib. The Temple of Man in the Age of Re-Enchantment. With a little bit of commentary in between. So starting off here at page 197. The first National Environmental Tech-In, April 22, 1970, became a defining moment in the modern environmental movement. Styled after the anti-Vietnam War demonstrations on American campuses, this Tech-In, initiated by Senator Gaylord Nelson, was meant to create a revolutionary ethic. Young people across the country were questioning and rejecting what were considered to be traditional American values. Nelson believed the Tech-In would empower this wandering generation with a new sense of purpose. As a politician, the senator also understood that if young people identified as environmental citizens, then the federal government could take vital steps toward a system of far-reaching regulations. He envisioned a national land use policy, a national policy on air and water, an ocean policy, a policy for resource management, and a national policy on population. Nelson was aware that these initiatives would interfere with American livelihoods, more or less saying as much in Look article published the day before the Tech-In. But so what? The future of the planet was at stake, or so everybody was told. Page 198. To facilitate this green revolution, aligning itself with the religious revolution and the cultural revolution already in motion, Friends of the Earth published the Environmental Handbook, a resource prepared ahead of time for the teach-in. Thousands of students across the country and beyond received copies. My high school in the rural Manitoba used it as a textbook. The handbook offered a radical vision as displayed in its opening pages with Smokey the Bear Sutra. If you want to look this article up, it's The Meaning of Ecology, 5 Views, Smokey the Bear Sutra, in the Environmental Handbook. Prepared for the first National Teach-In, April 22, 1970, by Ballantine Books, Friends of the Earth. With a halo of smoke and flame behind the forest fires of the Kali Yuga fires caused by the stupidity of those who think things can be gained and lost, whereas in truth all is contained vast and free in the blue sky and green earth of one mind, round-bellied to show his kind nature, and that the green earth has food enough for everyone who loves and trusts her, trampling underfoot wasteful freeways and needless suburbs, smashing the worms of capitalism and totalitarianism, wrathful but calm, austere but comic. Smokey the Bear will illuminate those who would help him. But for those who would hinder or slander him, he will put them out. And he will protect those who love woods and rivers, gods and animals. Now those who receive this sutra will enter the age of harmony of man and nature, and, in the end, will win highest perfect enlightenment. Page 200. Obviously, this eco-techno-utopianism would require a new spiritual reference. To that end, a list of acceptable worldviews was presented. Social religious forces that are ecologically and culturally enlightened. This list, including one scientific field of study, which I assume was inserted because of its Darwinian approach, along with 3 ethnicities probably named for their historic beliefs, offered agreeable patterns for the students to adopt and emulate. So this quote coming from page 331 of 4 Changes, the Environmental Handbook. Let these be encouraged. Gnostics, hip Marxists, Teilhard de Chardin Catholics, Druids, Taoists, biologists, witches, yogins, Bakikas, Quakers, Sufis, Tibetans, Zens, shamans, Bushmen, American Indians, Polynesians, anarchists, alchemists. The list is long. All primitive cultures, all communal and ashram movements, since it doesn't seem practical or even desirable to think that bloody force will achieve much, it would be best to consider this a continuing revolution of consciousness, which will be won not by the guns, but by seizing the key images, myths, archetypes, ecologies, and ecstasies, so that life won't seem worth living unless one is on the transforming energies side. Population alarmist Paul Ehrlich painted an apocalyptic scenario of global catastrophes and extinctions. By 1979, all major ocean life would vanish. So that was from Paul Ehrlich, Eco-Catastrophe, in the Environmental Handbook, page 174. Now page 203. What was the open secret of Findhorn? The unusual interfacing of nature spirits and humans in a symbiotic relationship with plants. Re-enchantment was being experienced in total community. Sprites and fairies and elements and gnomes. Findhorn became renowned as a place where supernatural entities manifested to the sensitive and attuned. Plant spirits, devas. The word is etymologically linked to the luminous deities in the Vedas. Offered advice on gardening while imparting metaphysical messages. So that was from 150, from the Findhorn Garden, pioneering a new vision of man and nature in cooperation, 1975. Before that was Paul Hawken, The Magic of Findhorn, Harper and Row, 1975. Pan, the honored woodland deity, ruler of all nature spirits, god of male sexuality, animals, fertility, gardening, plants, and associated with Dionysius, frolicked in the foliage and talked with humans. A former member of the Findhorn eco-village described one encounter near a grotto. So this is from Faces of Findhorn, Images of a Planetary Family, Harper and Row, 1980. As we stepped down into the sunken garden, the energy became more and more powerful, and I was left absolutely speechless. I literally couldn't vocalize or use my tongue. I realized that there was a living presence there, and I had a very good idea of what that presence was. Already knowing the answer, I simply put out mentally, "Who are you?" And the answer, which was not a voice, it was more like a total concept fed into my spirit, came back immediately. The nearest I could get to a verbalization of it was simply, "I am Pan." Robert Ogilvy Crombie, one of the first to encounter Pan, relates his walk-in experience with this ancient nature deity. So this is from the Findhorn Garden. I became aware of Pan walking by my side, and of a strong bond between us. He stepped behind me and then walked into me, so that we became one, and I saw the surroundings through his eyes. At the same time, part of me, the recording, observing part, stood aside. The experience was not a form of possession, but of identification. a kind of integration. Now, page 207. Others, too, had previously expressed ideas of a living earth. Catholic mystic Pierre Teilhard de Chardin postulated a co-evolving planet, enveloped in living consciousness and possessing a universal spirit. So the author cites Chardin's theory of a planetary superconsciousness, later played into the New Age movement. His book, The Phenomenon of Man, by Harper Perennial from 1959. And the emerging neo-pagan community embraced the earth as Great Mother, recognizing that the ultimate potential of Gaia was the telepathic unity of consciousness between all parts of the nervous system. So that's from Margaret Adler. Drawing Down the Moon, Witches, Druids, Goddess Worshippers, and Other Pagans in America Today, from the Viking Press, 1979. Gaia represented Gaia represented an awakening. Now, page 213. During the close of the 1992 Rio Earth Summit, Boutros Boutros-Ghali, the United Nations Secretary General, reminded government leaders of their new political commitments. Agenda 21, the Convention on Climate Change and Biological Diversity. So this is quoting from that. To the ancients, the Nile was a god to be venerated, as was the Rhine, an infinite source of European myths, or the Amazonian forest, the mother of forests. Throughout the world, nature was the abode of the divinities that gave the forest, the desert, or the mountains a personality which commanded worship and respect. The earth had a soul. To find that soul again, to give it new life, that is the essence of Rio. Now moving on to page 217. For example, in 1973, responding to the imminent and worldwide ecological catastrophe, the Canadian Council of Churches questioned private land holdings, saying, quote, a strong argument can be made for community ownership of all land. Who would own it? The government, and they would administer the land resources for the benefit of all. Based on the terrifying predictions from eco-alarmists like Paul Ehrlich, such extreme measures may have seemed reasonable to some Christian leaders, and in saying this, I am giving them the benefit of the doubt. For what the Canadian Council of Churches suggested was nothing short of communism. Page 231. Examples of enchantment are inescapable and ubiquitous. When Bolivia passes its Law of the Rights of Mother Earth in 2010, the New Zealand's Wanganui River was recognized in 2017 as having the same legal status as humans. And in the same year, Saudi Arabia granted citizenship to a robot. It was clear that a threshold was being crossed. By legal definition, we are becoming one with things. This, too, is a projection of Romans 1, quote, they exchanged the truth of God for the lie, and worshipped and served created things rather than the Creator. Sexually, new boundaries are being blurred. When the San Francisco-based Ecosex movement published its Ecosex Manifesto in 2011, promoting erotic encounters with nature and contractual marriages with trees and oceans. It was billed as a truly progressive expression of earth love. In subtle and flagrant ways, the products of our truth exchange are ever more emboldened. Page 237. When Theosophist Alice A. Bailey referenced those old and undesirable things that must disappear in the coming New Age, quote, hatred and the spirit of separation, I am compelled to ask, why? If all is one, then hatred is non-existent already. Or maybe the real oneness is hatred. Who can know? Of course, to determine if something is hateful requires judgment, which is predicated on the act of separating beliefs, values, and actions. To announce that separation is the lie, or that it is evil or hateful or wrong, means that distinctions have been categorically declared. Value judgments and truth claims have been made known. Separation has taken place. A relationship has been established. And moving on to page 347. Take, for example, the 1946 Southern Baptist Convention annual meeting, with its special committee on world peace, making this statement, quote, we believe that the goal of peacemakers must be a world organization on the Christian principles of order and justice. We further believe that in the field of international relations, such a goal can be accomplished only by some type of world government. Accordingly, we recommend that Southern Baptists endorse the principle of World Federation and work toward amending and improving the United Nations organization to achieve that end. So this is from the annual of the Southern Baptist Convention, Miami, Florida, May 15 to 19, 1946. Page 348. The National Conference of Methodist Youth and the newly formed American Baptist Convention each entertained world government resolutions during their annual meeting of 1950. The Methodist text called for relinquishing of sufficient national sovereignty for the establishment of lasting peace and the eventual development of effective international cooperation in the form of domestic federal world government. The American Baptist Convention sought to revise and amend the UN Charter so as to strengthen the machinery of world government. Support for the United World Federalists revealed broad interest. Official observers in the 1949 UWF General Assembly included the American Jewish Committee, American Library Association, American Psychiatric Association, Brotherhood of Railroad Trainmen, Catholic Association for International Peace, Congregational Christian Churches, Junior Chamber of Commerce USA, National Association of Deans of Women, National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, National Education Association, and the U.S. National Student Association, among others. In 1949, the Young Republican National Federation issued a resolution on empowering the United Nations. Quote, it should be a fundamental objective of the foreign policy of the United States to support and strengthen the United Nations and to seek its development into world federation. End quote. Alfred E. Driscoll, the Republican governor of New Jersey, was sympathetic to the UWF program. And Republican governor of Minnesota, Luther W. Youngdahl, was on its National Advisory Board. And page 354. Following the war, Winston Churchill publicly championed a Temple of Peace, a UN equipped to ensure world order. He expanded this vision while speaking at the inaugural meeting of the United European Movement. Quote, the creation of an authoritative, all-powerful world order is the ultimate aim towards which we must strive. Unless the same effective world supergovernment can be set up and brought quickly into action, the prospects for peace and human progress are dark and doubtful. That was from Winston Churchill, United Europe. Churchill Speaks, 1897 to 1963. Collected Speeches in Peace and War by Barnes & Noble, 1998. Page 355. In his 1959 book, The Future of Science, Bertrand Russell offered a logical conclusion to his technocratic imaginings. Quote, I believe that, owing to men's folly, a world government will only be established by force, and will therefore be at first cruel and despotic. But I believe that it is necessary for the preservation of scientific civilization, and that, if once realized, it will gradually give rise to the other conditions of a tolerable existence. Page 361. Stanford professor Paul Ehrlich became a poster boy for population control, equating population control to a cancer needing to be cut out. Scary scenarios reinforced Ehrlich's mandate. Nuclear war, man-made plagues, and global air pollution that would make the planet uninhabitable before 1990 loomed before us. So that was based on Paul R. Ehrlich. Eco-Catastrophe, the Environmental Handbook. Climate change, due in part to human activity, especially the cirrus cloud effect from spreading jet contrails, might usher a new global ice age. Overpopulation was our doom. In politics, a planetary regime to administer the global commons, the planetary regime might thus incorporate the United Nations into a sort of international agency for population resources and environment. Similar thinking underscored the Club of Rome. And on to page 396. Tasting from a smorgasbord of traditions and beliefs thus becomes fashionable, an elevating act of self-discovery, a journey into spiritual alchemy. Exaggerating for effect, let me introduce you to Perennial Man. After morning yoga, Perennial Man immerses himself in the teachings of Ken Wilber and Christian mystic Richard Rohr. Self-owning Wilber's integral theory and the flow of Rohr's cosmic Christ. Globetrotting, he ventures as a holy nomad and loses himself in ecstatic dance on the beaches of Goa. And in Auroville, he discovers intentional community before traveling to Australia for the Rainbow Serpent Festival. Tripping in the jungles of Brazil, he encounters the plant spirit during an ayahuasca journey. Going to the Theosophical Society headquarters in Wheaton, Illinois, he attends lectures on sacred art and discussions on Advaita philosophy. And, in the quiet of the evening, he contemplates inner divinity during a prayer walk in the labyrinth tucked along the west side of the grounds. In Toronto, he spins awake his mystic heart with Sufi masters, then disappears for a 2-week encounter with shamans in Oregon before going to Burning Man in Nevada. Returning home, he joins a Unitarian Universalist church and celebrates the sacred harvest with its Wiccan members. He cleanses his house of negative energy with crystals purchased at the Wellness Expo and handles workplace stress with transcendental meditation. Back pain is managed through Reiki, and the future is guided by tarot cards and astrology. And traditional Christianity, this was rejected as a teenager in Sunday school and mocked in university. Perennial Man is spiritual, but not religious. And page 462. Having been born as Martin in 1954, the global communication and satellite expert announced being transgender at age 40. So this is the story by Rothblatt's Personal Life. From Martin Rothblatt, Virtually Human, the Promise, and the Peril of Digital Immortality. From St. Martin's Press, 2014. The following year, 1995, Rothblatt's revolutionary volume, The Apartheid of Sex, argued for gender fluidity and transgenderism as a social norm. The apartheid of sex played a major role in promoting the concept of gender as a social construct. Label of male and female are acts of injustice, as sex is a complex continuum, and creative expression is negated when we constrain sex and gender to binary roles. Gender, like humanity itself, would be trans in the spin cycle of social transition. In 2011 edition of The Apartheid of Sex, retitled From Transgender to Transhuman, Rothblatt recounts the non-binary position, adding the following in the preface, quote, "In a similar fashion, I now see that it is also too constraining for there to be but two legal forms, human and non-human. There can be limitless variations of forms, from fully fleshed to purely software, with bodies and minds being made up of all degrees of electronic circuitry between. To be transhuman, one has to be willing to accept that they have a unique personal identity beyond flesh or software, and that this unique personal identity cannot be happily expressed as either human or not. It requires a unique transhuman expression." That was from Martin Rothblatt, From Transgender to Transhuman, a Manifesto of the Freedom of Form, from 2011. And so much for the quotes taken from Game of Gods by Carl Teichrib, put out by White Mud House Publishing. Certainly worth reading. The book is around 550 pages, so there's only just little excerpts there. Hope you enjoyed it.